Some of you may have heard of the Great Reset.
What is the Great Reset?
Reset.
So that...
Is it a version of the New World Order? Is that what they're changing the name to?
You know how I feel about political outlooks and differences in political outlooks. I don't think it's a weakness. I think it's a strength. And I think America needs to get back to being able to have a conversation with people who don't agree. We learn so much from each other when we do that. You, I think, are going to hear and learn and question and disagree, or perhaps really agree, like very few podcasts will push you to. You're going to learn an awful lot.
If you actually see video of the sun coming up and going down, many times you'll see that the sun starts off as it's coming up very, very tiny, and it gets bigger as it gets closer to midday and then gets smaller again. It's literally that effect of perspective, you know.
And in sports, NASCAR fans are expressing discomfort over Curtis Davis's new Tampax-sponsored car.
The great deep is under it, just water. It's just deep water, and above the firmament is water. And, you know, it says in Genesis that he separated the water below from the water above and made a space and then made dry land appear out of the water. So what's under the flat earth? Well, it's water, and it just goes on. Again, I don't know for sure because I've not been under there. I don't know what's past the outside of, or the you know, the first few hundred miles of Antarctica. It was fake. It was fake. It was absolutely fake.
And I will prove that to you tonight with their words and them on videotape talking about it.
They're never allowed to approach the real top people in the first tier, but they can only serve through serving the second tier. And these are families like the British Royal family. So the first rank, first tier is the old aristocracies of Europe, plus what they call their Hofjuden, their court Jews, which are the Rothschilds and families of that nature, who are able to raise money for them and keep them functioning.
And at the end of the Civil War, Colonel House was the only person in the state of Texas who had any money. So he took over the entire Democratic Party in the southern states, which were occupied territory, and still are. You still have two political parties in the South. They're called the Carpetbaggers and the Scalawags. The Carpetbaggers are the Republicans, and the Scalawags are the Democrats. And you have exactly the same government that you have had in martial law in 1865, with the same people running everything. It's a perfect setup because everybody knows each other, everybody agrees with each other. There hasn't been a political contest in any southern state since 1865.
Literally, it's a money-making scheme. Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's a leading astronomer in America.
I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson, bitch.
Because it's controlled, and of course it's controlled by those with money and power to do such a thing, but you look at the fruits that are produced, whether these people that are leading us down this path with technology and goods and economy and this that are actually intending to help us, or whether they're saving the good shit for themselves and giving all the poison to the people. It's a big trip in a way. It's a big trip down a rabbit hole, because you can live your whole life thinking everything is as it's been explained to you, and literally once it starts to unravel, if you don't know what's happening or why it's happening, it feels like reality is breaking apart and crumbling. In a way, we're lucky to have these experiences because we knew from the first fucking day shit isn't what it seems. Nothing is. And I think we also had these experiences probably because we inherently always knew that something was wrong or that there's more to reality.
So, Earth, throughout its life, even when it formed, it was spinning, and it got a little wider at the equator than it does at the poles. So it's not actually a sphere, it's oblate, and officially it's an oblate spheroid. That's what we call it. But not only that, it's slightly wider below the equator than above the equator.
A little chubbier.
little chubbier.
Yeah.
Chubby's a good way. It's like pear-shaped.
So my question to him would be, why is there land at the equator? Because water will move more readily than rock. So if the Earth is spinning, the water will be collected at the equator. I mean, if you spin a wet tennis ball, okay, you spin a wet tennis ball, the water shoots off at the equator, essentially. So all the water will be gathered around the equator. So why is there land at the equator? Doesn't make any sense.
I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson, bitch.
There's not too many people involved in this. I mean...
Well, I think we're at critical mass already. Now, we have a very interesting situation, which we saw during the last election. You had the biggest turnout that you ever had, and of course, the trend had been for lower and lower percentages of the American people to come out and vote, because they did everything that they possibly could to discourage the American people from participating in the election.
There's not too many people involved in this.
You either vote for Tweedledum or Tweedledee. Well, this time, you suddenly had a wild card, and that was a billionaire.
Small, tiny,
Miniature.
unimportant pieces of slime crawling around on a speck of dust in an infinite universe.
And we choose the idea that we can, as Americans, when we act together, do anything. This is the United States of America.
I think we're still trying to move in that direction. If he does too much of that, he's not going to be around very long.
There was some kind of conspiracy.
We've acted together. We have never been unable to overcome whatever the problem was. If you agree with me, go to Joe 30330 and help me in this fight. Thank you very much.
The Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. Okay, seems to make sense, because if you put a long exposure camera pointing it to the North Star, you'll see the stars will make perfect circles around, perfect star trails. The only problem is the Earth is also orbiting the Sun at 67,000 miles an hour. Okay, the Sun is moving, dragging the Earth and all the planets up that way or that way at 600,000 miles an hour. So why do we see perfect circles? You know, because that's the slowest speed, that's slowest motion in that mix, and yet the Earth is moving 67 times faster that way and 600 times faster that way. So you should see the stars do all sorts of strange motions, but you don't.
Earth's seismic noise has been the lowest in decades due to lockdowns. Scientists saw a wave of quiet around the world in 2020. Ambient noise in some cities fell 50% as fewer people used transport and factories closed. There were also record falls in air pollution, clearing city skies from Asia to America. But by late 2020, it had returned to pre-pandemic levels. Carbon emissions were also down 7% last year, but the drop won't slow climate change unless we lock in emissions cuts. How quiet was your local area? The World Economic Forum asked. Well, so there you have it. We'll go from lockdowns to lock-ins. Shut down your factories, that's good. Stop people using transport, that's good.
The local pockets of resistance are really quite remote and fragmented. They pose no threat at all to your reign. Time will take care of them. As for the Chinese... They could pose a potential problem, but one that with care and if need be force can be handled.
This is so...
And so everything that's part of the public domain, everything in the culture is for sale. So the G30 brings together 32 of the most powerful people in the world. They are essentially the executive committee of the policy core of global capitalism. They can formally develop policy recommendations outside of government oversight. They organize behind-the-scenes study groups with other TCC elites.
Don't be foolish. They're condemning themselves to death.
And they provide an international understanding of policies needed to protect global capitalism and continued growth.
Don't make a mistake.
Collectivists claim the opposite. An emphasis on the rights of the individual, they suggest, rather than on the greater good, tends to inhibit social cooperation and promote an atomized population in which every man and woman is an island left to fend for themselves. But here, collectivists have it backwards. We are naturally social animals, and so the atomization of individuals only results when a government, under the guise of the greater good, is granted the power to enforce social isolation, or else to sow the seeds of fear and suspicion amongst friends and neighbors.
I warned you a few months ago about the Great Reset.
Behind the Iron Curtain, the most prominent complaint in the totalitarian system was the feeling of mental isolation. The individual feels alone and continually on the alert. There is only mutual suspicion.
I warned you a few months ago about the Great Reset, and the mainstream media, you'll never guess what they did. They called me a conspiracy theorist to isolate me even more. I don't think it's working.
There's a need for a new world order, but it has different characteristics in different parts of the world. The relations with China are the fundamental challenge of American policy.
But we have another choice. We can build a new social contract. In short, we need a great reset. Contract. In short, we need a great reset.
I should be used to it by now. Remember all my wild conspiracies, like 9/11 that I said would happen in New York City? That was in 1999. The 2008 financial crisis, conspiracy theory. I was talking about that in 2006. Or how about the caliphate that will never happen? Oh, wait. It did.
Yes, we may reach a deal on trade, but this is a Cold War. You have started a Cold War again.
It's too much to take in. It really is quite amazing. I mean, most people don't realize the degree to which capital is so concentrated in the world today and how few people control it. I mean, that concentration is bigger than governments. Governments are paying attention to protecting the capital.
In short, we need a great reset.
I hope this makes you nervous First of all, they speak about the global stakeholders. Who's that? Is it world leaders? Is it religious leaders? Is it the academics?
And they're not democratic. And it's like, well, okay, it's not our opinion.
So
it's
it was an author piece. That wasn't
lady.
really, that wasn't
it's
made
an author
clear.
piece.
But it wasn't made clear on the video, though.
It actually says underneath the tweet with the video, and it links to the piece, because the video is trying to get you to read the piece. And the piece says, this is by Ida Hawkins. She's a Danish politician. And by the way, it's her opinion, and you don't have to go along with it. And we certainly don't endorse it, because if we endorsed everything that we had, we've had Donald Trump come to the forum, we've had Joe Biden come to the forum. So you've got to stay neutral on those kinds of issues, and we try and stay neutral in order to keep conversations going.
Western democracies cannot disengage if they are to keep the world's authoritarians at bay. Also, the age of sovereign nation-states is mostly a myth. Throughout its history, Europe was marked by efforts to reconcile diversity and unity through federalist projects such as the Holy Roman Empire or the Hanseatic League. Those long predate the creation of the modern nation-state in the late 19th century. Globalism is thus not a historic aberration. Nationalism is.
In addition to global public health crisis, CAPS is creating havoc with the trade and travel industries. The frightening public health toll of CAPS continues to mount. Patients are overwhelming healthcare facilities around the world, including many of the makeshift triage and temporary care facilities. People are avoiding public spaces out of fear of infection and in compliance with public health recommendations. This has had a dramatic effect on the retail and service sectors. Businesses of all kinds are struggling to operate, let alone provide basic services, as their workers have fallen sick or refuse to come to work.
We try and look at long-term risks that people don't talk about, which is why we get involved in talking about things like pandemic risk, which is really niche, and which, let's be honest, before January 2021, no one gave two hoots about. Whenever you talked about it, people would be like, well, yeah, really, come on. Let's think about finance, let's think about other stuff.
Some companies have allowed telecommuting, but for most businesses and employees, this is not an option. Public health agencies have issued travel advisories, while some countries have banned travel from the worst affected areas. As a result, the travel sector is taking a huge hit. Travel bookings are down 45%, and many flights have been canceled. Consumer confidence has fallen dramatically, and people are delaying or canceling discretionary purchases. As a result, manufacturers are scaling back production on many goods. On the other hand, staples like food and medicine are being hoarded. Mandated border closures and trade restrictions are creating severe localized shortages. The Purchasing Managers' Index suffered its sharpest decline in 50 years. It's safe to say we face a tough dilemma. The movement of people may facilitate the spread of CAPS, but interruptions to travel and trade may have economic consequences that are just as bad.
We try and nudge people in that direction, and we try and use evidence from experts who work inside the forum to kind of make the argument that there's generally, if you want better economies, you have to have more equal distribution of wealth, you have to have better legal systems, you have to have rule of law, all of these things kind of help to deliver better results. Well, it's hiding in plain sight. These people, they want to take everything away from us. It's like, Agenda 2030 is actually something that I think Mark Malloch Brown came up with. Who used to be a foreign minister for Gordon Brown years ago. Yeah, and he came up with it, and it's like the SDGs basically, which is a horrible term, social development goals, and it's how. And again, you sort of think to yourself, why do organizations come up with these terrible kind of acronyms and these kind of long lists of points? It's like 17 SDGs. I wish I could name all of them. Probably in my job I ought to be able to, but I can't quite go through every single one. And the reason they do it is the same sort of reason we come up with things like the Great Reset, because they want to be able to talk to people in all sorts of different places with all sorts of different backgrounds about a shopping list of things. And so Agenda 2030 or whatever, I think, is the timeline by which Mark Malloch Brown, who happens to be a Brit, said when he was UN Deputy Secretary General, could we get people to, get clean water for everyone by that date? Could we get this by that date? Could we get that by this date? No. And there's 17 of them, far too many to kind of get movement. Well, it's hiding in plain sight. These people, they want to take everything away from us. It's like, well...
Something like 1984 could actually happen. This is the direction the world is going in at the present time. In our world, there will be no emotions except fear, rage, triumph, and self-abasement. The sex instinct will be eradicated. We shall abolish the orgasm. There will be no loyalty except loyalty to the party. But always there will be the intoxication of power. Always, at every moment, there will be the thrill of victory, the sensation of trampling on an enemy who is helpless. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen. It depends on you.
It's hiding in plain sight. They want to take everything away from us.
In short, we need a great reset.
Because bankers consider communism and dictatorship as a good investment. A banker considers a dictatorship as a perfect government because everybody is totally controlled. And
the Russians, okay, they're getting in on the act as well.
They make money from this. And have you seen the imagery that they put out? The Chinese have put out, I think it was the Japanese.
Put out images of Earth from the moon, and it looks even more fake than NASA's ones. It's a money-making scheme, and they're all joining the bandwagon. But, that isn't the first thing that's been hidden over the years.
We're all driving petrol cars.
Right, and there's space, and it's within our interest to explore space and go to the moon, go to Mars. Yeah, people will pay for it.
And they're making billions. And yeah, there's more to it because I believe there's a big deception coming.
Part of this is that the ultimate crisis of humanity, short of a global nuclear war, is also environmental degradation.
So the people causing this are a very small number, 100 companies. There's a 30-year lag between, it's a 10-year lag between CO2 emissions and temperature changes. So what we're putting out now, we'll see the impacts 10 years from now. The rising temperatures mean a continuing worsening of weather events, extreme storms, record-breaking heats, colds, fires, tidal surges, heavy death rates, and financial losses. We will see massive fresh water and food shortages. All of this will be in our future if left unchecked. Global capital is a primary contributor to those problems, and they invest in all the things that are making it happen.
We know the media obviously doesn't like to research and read, so why don't we just listen? There's the head of the World Economic Forum. His name is Klaus Schwab.
Now is the historical moment, the time, not only to fight severe virus, but to shape the system for the need for the post-corona era.
So I'm going to agree, actually, with the Times. They call us conspiracy theorists for saying this, and I want to agree that...
Because if we get that wrong, then much else we may do right. It's going to be subsumed in an attention to a conflict like the Cold War. And that is something that we must really avoid and if we want to have a constructive world, the purely strategic and military problems that the shift in power relationships brings will confuse us if we do not consider that we have to bring about, together with other countries, a different consciousness of what a world order is.
And that no man might buy or sell save that he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name.
The transnational capital elite takes pride in pointing out that they have the largest middle class ever, but that's the 20%, but that doesn't extend down into the rest of the world, and they are getting poorer every day.
For an hour, we have talked about economics, safety to the group,
of massive civil wars and revolutions, and financial collapse with you guys, that sort of thing, and environmental collapse, and pulling them out of poverty, massive civil wars and revolutions. It wouldn't take that much. They are the ones in power to do that, short of...
Now, could I prove that? This morning, when I was on radio, forgetting how much the world has changed already, I promised that this show would be up in full on YouTube and Facebook. Then we met with our attorneys and all of the people that are working literally their whole day trying to carve out a way to where we can communicate with you on social media.
The prince is standing before this vast crowd, his arms outstretched. People are cheering and praising the prince of this world. Medical experts are amazed, speechless at this miracle. There is no doubt
he lives among us humans. As to the economic man, no.
Look, we don't believe that you are what you eat. It can be shown that you aren't what you don't eat, and if you don't, you are not. But the corollary wouldn't, and I'm afraid there's a lot too much of that, a lot of it in the capitalist world. But no, we realize that there are other needs, many of them non-material. Let me suggest an example to you, the case of the person who gives blood and does so voluntarily and without a reward. There's no sacrifice involved in that. You don't lose a pint of blood by giving one, but you do help another person. And you don't have to posit altruism. You have fulfilled your own need to help and be of service without giving up anything and without a cash transaction, and you've increased the general welfare. I regard that as a socialist attitude to one's fellow creatures and perfectly unsentimental.
You know, you might want to review the types of content. You just must do. PragerU, if I went to the Daily Online and I wanted to like their page, would it tell me, you just must do?
Then we have this mass of people who are going to believe anything they're told because they can't really think clearly. And very few people of very high IQ who have good cognitive function who can figure this all out.
The financial core of the transnational class are the directors of banks and the asset firms that control this $41 trillion. In addition, they also serve many other smaller asset management firms, adding traditional trillions of dollars and more. So,
you know, researching and getting a passion for this, because this is what I think, it's the truth. And we recognize the truth when we hear it. And we feel it. And this I believe, has come at the exact right time so that we awaken to what's going on in the world. Nothing else, 9/11 even, hasn't awoken people, right, to this extent. It exploded. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people looking at it. Not even that, probably. And nobody was talking about it, right?
And which you have the serfs and you have the lords in the castle, and that's it. And there's not to be anything in between.
This is amazing. If that's true, and there's no purpose, there's no meaning to anything, then our owners can do whatever they want with us.
Despite this repression, major victories were still won. The captains of industry in America had just watched peasants and industrial workers in Russia rise to power. It had reverberations everywhere. The display of power was formidable. Like a prairie fire, the blaze of revolution was sweeping over every American institution of law and order a year ago.
This is amazing.
And you're just lying to the American people.